first day on a new job. About to get acquainted with a new boss, a new shop, and a line of cars you never worked on before. Well, you're about to meet a fellow technician in that same boat. He's Jim Miller, a darn good engine and transmission man who was just signed on for his first tour of duty in a shop servicing Chrysler-built cars. Right now, Jim's new boss, Al Turner, is making sure Jim knows what is expected of him before he tackles his new job. Let's join him.
Jim, you've overhauled a lot of competitive engines. Why do you suppose some of the engines you've worked on got so old and worn so fast?
9 times out of 10, Al, major engine trouble at relatively low mileage is probably caused by owner neglect, or maybe owner abuse, or even tough driving conditions.
Exactly, Jim. And that's why I want to tell you what we do to make sure our owners don't get into any serious engine, transmission, or driveline troubles. To begin with, do you know what this is?
Looks like engine oil. Is there something unusual or extra special about it?
It's MS oil, the only kind that ever goes into the crankcase of cars serviced in this dealership.
Aren't there some cases like engine break-in where straight mineral oil is just as good or better?
Absolutely not, Jim. Straight mineral oil doesn't have the necessary additives. It won't prevent scuffing. Parts like a cam lobe and a tappet will scuff and wear excessively if straight mineral oil is used.
Anti-scuff chemicals in MS oil not only prevent scuffing and scoring, they ensure the proper polishing and seating of cams and piston rings. You've replaced enough camshafts to know what I mean, Jim.
I sure have, Tech, but I never blamed it on the kind of oil. I blamed it on dirty oil, neglected oil changes.
Oil changes are part of the story, Jim. Engine heat gradually destroys the anti-scuff additives. Once the anti-scuff additive is used up, the oil can no longer prevent rubbing and excessive wear.
Then some of those scuffed and worn parts I've replaced were probably caused by the wrong kind of oil or tired old oil that has had the anti-scuff cooked out of it. But tell me, how fast does an engine use up this additive?
The anti-scuff properties of an MS oil are good for about 4,000 miles of highway driving, the kind a car gets on expressways and turnpikes.
I suppose this is a foolish question, but wouldn't the oil last twice as long if they put in twice as much anti-scuff dope?
Nope. The amount of anti-scuff additive is just one of the things that affects oil life and oil change periods. Al's just about to tell you about another one.
Right, Tech. I'm sure you've seen cylinder bores, hydraulic tappets, timing chains, rocker arms, and valve springs that were covered with a reddish-brown rust-like coating.
I sure have. And I've noticed that even after cleaning those parts up, the surface looks etched, like something's been eating into the metal.
Well, that's a good description of the way corrosive acids go to work on engine parts, Jim. As a matter of fact, corrosive acids in the engine oil are the most common cause of excessive engine wear and broken valve springs.
From the rusty appearance, I assumed it was water in the engine. Maybe a head gasket leak.
You're partly right, Jim. Corrosive acids are a byproduct of combustion, a combination of moisture and partly burned fuel. Water is bad enough, but acid's a lot worse.
If corrosive acids are a normal byproduct of combustion, how can MS oil prevent them from forming?
Well, the corrosive inhibitors in MS oil can't stop acid from forming. Their job is to neutralize the corrosive acids as fast as they form.
How many miles can you put on an MS oil before all the corrosion inhibitors used up?
The formation of acids, which use up the corrosion inhibitors, depends more on driving conditions and time than it does on oil mileage. Let me give you some examples of what I mean. Normal combustion, particularly in a cold engine, produces relatively large amounts of acid and other contaminants. A rich fuel mixture or a poorly tuned engine makes this worse. That's why cold weather and short trips that don't give the engine time to warm up use up the corrosion inhibitors in a hurry. Under these driving conditions, the owner should change oil every 2 months or maybe oftener. But I'm getting ahead of my story. I'll cover oil change intervals in detail as soon as I finish telling you about the other additives in MS oil and why they're needed. The chemistry of sludge and varnish is pretty complicated, but let me give you the highlights of what causes these oil contaminants to form in an engine. Like corrosive acids, sludge is a byproduct of combustion. To produce sludge, mix several parts of partially burned gasoline, combustion soot, and moisture. Add this concoction to the oil, and you have a dandy batch of sludge.
Varnish is manufactured in an engine by cooking the basic sludge ingredients, partly burned gasoline and soot at high engine temperatures. Take engine oil that's sludged up from cold weather or short trip driving, and then cook it by driving at high speed, and you have the formula for one kind of varnish.
You make it sound pretty gruesome, Tech, but it sure explains some of the badly varnished piston rings and hydraulic tappet plungers I've seen. How about telling me what MS oil does to combat varnish?
Sure thing, Jim. The oxidation additives in MS oil react chemically with the sludge and varnish-forming ingredients. These additives change soot and fuel particles into new chemical compounds, ingredients that don't form sludge and varnish.
I can see that a cold engine, or an engine that wasn't tuned to burn the fuel mixture clean and completely, would dump a lot of sludge and varnish ingredients into the oil and use up the oxidation additives in a hurry. I'm also beginning to understand the kind of trouble you can get into with straight mineral oil. For example, on a new engine, rings are sometimes slow to seat in, particularly if the car is used on short runs at low speeds. The same kind of driving that slows down ring seating speeds up sludge formation. What's the answer?
Tell the owner to stick to MS oil for maximum engine protection, and drive it a bit to seat the rings. Speeds up to 50 or even 60 miles an hour are desirable right from the day of delivery, just so long as he avoids continuous high speeds for the first 500 miles. Straight mineral oil and slow driving can't solve any problems. It can only cause problems. You know, the original factory fill is a high-quality MS oil, and it should be left in until the regularly scheduled oil change. If the owner has to add oil, it should be MS oil.
Good point, Tech. We tell our owners not to let anyone talk them into special break-in oils or additives. We explain that to ensure good ring seating, they should put some miles on their new cars at moderately high speeds. But to get back to the oil contamination story, even under ideal driving conditions, small amounts of the contaminants we've been talking about manage to get into the oil. Small amounts of these solid and semi-liquid contaminants aren't particularly harmful if evenly dispersed. However, when even small amounts of contaminants gang up and start to concentrate in critical areas of the oil flow system, they reduce oil circulation and can cause serious problems.
The detergent and dispersant additives in MS oil keep contaminants from ganging up or accumulating in critical areas of the engine where they can interfere with oil flow, or might even form concentrated deposits on moving parts. And last but not least, MS oil contains additives which minimize the formation of air bubbles and foam. I think it's obvious that it takes a solid stream of oil to maintain oil pressure and a strong foam-free film of oil to provide adequate lubrication.
I get the idea.
Anti-foam additives must work something like the low suds level detergent my wife uses in her automatic washing machine. If foaming mineral oil is anything like the mess I got into when I tried to wash my coveralls with soap powder, I have a good picture of foam problems.
The picture's convincing, even if the comparison isn't scientifically accurate, Jim.
I'd like to ask a question about oil viscosity. I know oils that are too heavy cause hard starting, and oils that are too light result in low oil pressure and may increase oil consumption. Is there anything else I ought to know about oil viscosity?
Just a couple of things, Jim. This chart covers both ordinary SAE grades and the multi-viscosity grades. If the single viscosity grades are used, the viscosity should be right for the lowest temperature expected to reduce starting problems.
That's right. But remember, Jim, the multi-viscosity oils were developed for parts of the country where it changes from swimming to skiing weather almost overnight.
Isn't that stretching the facts a bit?
Maybe just a mite. But seriously, the multi-grades do provide good lubrication over a wide range of temperatures. What's more, 5W20 is a good substitute for 10W, and it'll give much better cold starting. 5W20 can be used any time you expect it to drop lower than 10 above zero. And of course, you don't have to change the multi-grades every time the weather changes, just every 2 months. But speaking of changes, one of you young fellas out there better quit gawking long enough to turn the record over.
I can see that picking the right viscosity oil isn't much of a problem, but it seems to me that oil quality and oil change intervals might get pretty complicated.
Picking a high-quality oil isn't as much of a problem as it was a few years back. Every drop of oil we use has been tested and certified by our supplier as meeting the car maker's requirements for MS oil.
Sounds mighty legal and foolproof, but just what does it mean?
Well, it's the oil supplier's guarantee that his MS oil contains only high-quality base oil stock, has all of the essential additives we've talked about in amounts specified by a committee of engineers representing the major car manufacturers.
It's mighty important for all of our dealers to use certified MS oil and to educate their owners on the importance of using certified MS oil, just in case they buy a quart or two outside the dealership.
That's right. And let me tell you some of the things we do to educate owners. We buy bulk MS oil from a supplier who puts the same oil in quart cans. We keep a display of his canned oil in the customer service reception area. This helps us advertise the fact that we use the best. It also gives our write-up men a handy prop to use in training owners to look for the MS label.
Speaking of owner education, what do you tell owners about concentrates that you add to the oil in the crankcase? And what about the new super-duper premium-priced oils we're starting to hear about?
Let me tell what I think about the concentrated additives, Jim. Additional concentrates aren't needed in a certified MS oil. Concentrates can't change a low-quality oil into a good oil, and the wrong combination of concentrates and base oil can do a lot of harm. Of course, every Mopar and Chrysler product has been tested and approved by our engineers. Like a doctor's prescription, they're sort of special products for unusual conditions. Using anything else is like taking a patent medicine when you ought to see a doctor.
That takes care of special concentrates. Now, how about those super buck-a-quart oils?
Well, as far as I know, they're good oils. If an owner wants to use one that is certified as MS, it's okay with me, providing he sticks to the change intervals recommended for MS oil. Since I don't know how much extra additive they contain, I wouldn't take a chance on changing them any less than the MS oil I'm using now.
Speaking of oil changes, from what you've told me about the various driving conditions affecting engine oil additives, recommending the right oil change interval must get sort of complicated.
It might be if you tried to figure out right down to the last mile or day how far each car would go between oil changes. For all practical purposes, the certified car care recommendation of an oil change every 2 months takes care of most of our owners. We have a few exceptions, and we handle them on an individual basis. For example, we service several cars that are used by men who supervise construction work. They don't pile up a lot of miles, but they breathe a lot of dust and dirt. We have those cars on a once-a-month oil and filter change schedule. Even so, we're watching them mighty close. That'll be part of your job.
How so?
Well, anytime you service one of those jobs and notice extra dirty oil, or you suspect a plugged filter, be sure and let me know about it so I can contact the owner. I know he'd rather buy a couple of extra oil changes than have his car out of service for engine repairs. We service a local fleet of service cars and panel trucks that either idle a lot or are stopped and started between short trips. They're never driven fast enough or far enough to get warmed up. We've got them on a once-a-month oil change and a 90-day filter change schedule. In some two-car families, we get into a little different situation. Mom's car is used for 3 or 4 very short trips almost every day, but she only drives a few hundred miles a month. Her car needs a change every 2 months, just the same as hubby, who piles up 1,000 miles a month.
How do you go about educating owners on oil change requirements?
Well, to begin with, we go over the Certified Car Care Plan and the owner's manual at new car delivery time. However, since he's usually in a hurry and seldom in the right mood to think about service and spending money, we cover oil change requirements again when he comes in for his 1,000-mile inspection. Most owners are in the right mood and willing to take time to talk about service when they come in for that 1,000-mile inspection. At least they're not in as big a hurry to rush off as they are on new car delivery day. We found that this is the best time to talk about the way their car is used. We make sure the owner understands the certified car care schedules and benefits, the importance of using MS oil, and we find out as much as we can about driving conditions, the way his car is driven. Of course, an owner who doesn't come in for the 1,000-mile inspection within 60 days after delivery is apt to be a short tripper. We give those owners a follow-up call and get them to bring their cars in. Matter of fact, we've put all of our 1963 owners on an every other month follow-up plan.
I hope every dealer realizes the importance of explaining to every owner the owner's service responsibility to his car. For example, Al uses the certified car care booklet to explain oil and essential preventive services. He also uses the reference book, particularly some of the pictures we've seen today, to explain what happens to oil and why MS oil must be used.
The reference book, the owner's manual, and the certified car care booklet are valuable owner education tools. Now, here's a job for you, Jim. On every car you service, I want you to keep a sharp eye out for clues which might indicate that oil or filter should be changed more frequently. Here are some of the things to look for. With engine warmed up and idling, lift off the oil filler cap. If crankcase fumes come out of the oil filler, chances are the crankcase vent valve is plugged and should be serviced more often than twice a year.
Of course, a dirty air cleaner is a good clue to dusty driving conditions or an owner that ought to come in for service more often.
How about oil filter condition?
There isn't any easy way I know of to tell for sure whether or not the oil filter is plugged or partly plugged. In order to be on the safe side, we change filters twice a year at one of the regular every other month oil changes, even if they go 4,000 miles every 2 months. Any car or truck that is operated under conditions of extreme dust and dirt should have both the oil and the filter changed frequently, once a month or even more often.
If in doubt, play it safe and don't try to extend oil and filter change intervals. If you spot a car with anything except a Chrysler or Mopar filter, tell Al about it. Our filters are Chrysler engineered to provide maximum protection. They are superior in both capacity and ability to trap and hold even very fine dirt.
That's particularly important now that all of our engines use a full flow filter. A low-capacity filter will plug sooner. The bypass valve will open and feed the engine unfiltered oil.
I've seen what unfiltered oil does to piston rings and bearings. Say, tell me, what about the effect of tune-up on oil changes?
Any engine condition that reduces combustion efficiency shortens the life of the engine oil. Carburetor adjustment, condition of ignition points and spark plugs, ignition timing, manifold heat control valve operation, and the cooling system thermostat affect sludge formation and the life of the oil.
Another thing, few people realize how much fuel quality affects the life of the engine oil. Poor burning fuels increase the amount of partially burned gasoline entering the crankcase. These fuels are real sludge makers.
How about giving Jim the highlights of Driveline service before we end this session?
Well, I don't see why we should have any trouble at all with transmissions, U-joints, differentials, or rear axles. And I'll tell you why I say that. Type A, suffix A, automatic transmission fluid, does for transmissions what MS oil can do for the engine. Besides, since there's no combustion heat or contamination to worry about, the fluid will last the life of the car under normal driving conditions.
The transmission inline filter used on all models traps and holds any abrasive particles, takes them out of circulation. Increased transmission cooler capacity is good transmission life insurance, too.
Universal joints shouldn't be any problem as long as the seals are in good condition. We check seals carefully every 6 months. That's a regular certified car care service. Another important every 6 months certified car care check is rear axle lube level. The new rear axle vent and new seals, plus the recommended differential lubricant, should prevent differential and rear axle troubles.
There's one hitch to look out for in connection with Driveline service. Keep your eye open for cars with trailer hitches. If an owner is using his car like a truck to pull heavy loads at high speeds, his Driveline, transmission to rear wheels, will need some special attention in lubrication services. You'll find the recommendations for trailer hauling cars, extreme high-speed driving, and other special operating conditions covered in detail in the reference book. In addition, it covers the closed crankcase vent, transmission, universal joint lubrication, and other powertrain services. Anything you want to add, Al, before we sign off of this?
There sure is, Tech. You know, Jim, the 1963 model cars are the best cars ever. They'll not only deliver trouble-free driving for the original owner, they're going to give the second and third owner many more thousands of trouble-free miles, backed up by our 5-year, 50,000-mile warranty.
And to that, I'd like to add, Chrysler Corporation's 5-year, 50,000-mile warranty is mighty convincing proof of their confidence in the superior design and quality they are putting into their cars. Chrysler Corporation is the only American car producer that is willing to back up its claims of product superiority with its warranty pocketbook. And that's more than any of our competitors can say. Now, one last word. You fellas don't have as much to learn about Chrysler-built cars as Jim does. But do me a favor. Read the reference book. Talk up the product and your dealerships. And whatever you do, keep 'em rolling.